This is the story of 4 boys who changed the face of pop.
We're the Monkees.
It was always us together against the rest of the world, against the crazy adults.
With a revolutionary TV series.
The only time you saw long-haired kids on television, they were being arrested.
And songs that lit up the charts at the height of the 60s.
It came at the right time, and it was really the Beatles that made it possible with A Hard Day's Night.
Over the next hour, we'll hear the extraordinary tale of the made-up group who became a proper band.
They had to become a real rock group and play their own instruments, and so then it became a real labor of love.
Of the Manchester lad who became a pop legend.
People used to stop me round here in the street. I see your David's on again. Oh, is he going to be famous? And I said, I think so.
And of the monkey mania that followed them around the world.
Davy was waving, he was gorgeous. 2 fans ran up to them. All the monkeys were pushed into a car. Davy forever.
For a short time in the late 60s, the Monkees delivered some of the catchiest tunes the pop charts have ever seen.
They were written by great songwriters like Carole King and Neil Diamond. Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart. You got these great songwriters, wrote amazing songs.
With their own TV show blasting into homes around the world each week, the Monkees brought something completely new to pop fans.
Then I saw her face. Now I'm a believer.
It resonates with people. They just love it, generation after generation.
Another Pleasant Valley Sunday.
The incredible story of the Monkees starts nearly 50 years ago. In 1964, the Beatles and their groundbreaking movie, A Hard Day's Night, were taking America by storm. Impressed by the irreverent tone of the film, 2 rookie TV producers, Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider, began to develop a show about an American pop group trying to make their way in the music business. They advertised for 4 insane boys, aged 17 to 21, to make up their new band.
Then a line formed, and it was about, I don't know, 600 guys outside of Columbia Pictures.
This was the start of an unusual casting process.
It was very laid back, I remember. It was very casual. Their feet up on the couches, and there was pizza boxes, and they had coffee cups everywhere.
It's funny, he's been asking about you too.
And I would sit and talk to them.
Tell me the Colonel Melvin story.
No, because that's a very dumb story. However, I will tell you about...
And it was really kind of an interesting way of trying to let them be themselves, catch them a bit off guard.
What?
I really think you should have been a jockey.
That's the way I normally cast, by the way, not necessarily with a camera.
Abdef Gish Kulnap Christa Wikshes. What was that? It's the alphabet. Abdef Gish Kulnap Christa Wikshes.
I remember feeling awkward. I've since seen it, and I think I look awkward. But there were some funny things in there.
Why do you want to be a monkey? Well, it's my natural inheritance.
But apparently it wasn't disqualifying, because they invited me back for a screen test.
I want to help SJ too, but I can't. He's feeble-minded. Hey, knock it off.
I do remember David because we really clicked. Both knew how to look at a script and memorize it and move on and, you know.
I want to help SJ, but I can't. He's feeble-minded.
Knock it off. Wendell's right.
A little while later, I called them. So what's the story? I said, we'll call you back. So how does it feel to be a monkey? I put down the phone. I said, excuse me just a second. Walked out of the office. I was sitting, yippee! Feels fine, thank you. What do we do next?
Autumn 1965. The 4 Monkees were now in place. Former child stars Davy Jones and Mickey Dolenz were joined by budding musicians Peter Tork and Michael Nesmith.
Mickey and I were the actors, Peter and Mike were the musicians. You know, when they said who's going to be the drummer, Mickey, you know, was unfortunately the one that didn't step back. You know, we just left him standing there. I didn't want to be the drummer.
To prepare the boys for their new roles, 28-year-old comic actor Jim Frawley was brought on board.
I was hired to work for 3 months with these 4 guys who had never worked together before and to establish their relationships, one with the other as improvised actors.
Wait a minute. Wait, guys, you have to do the scare. The old monkey scare.
What do you monkey scare, man?
Come on, it's a groovy bit, man. Let's do the scare. You know?
I was actually uncomfortable with improv. Yeah, Jim came in and was throwing the imaginary ball, and, okay, you're a captain of a ship.
Captain? I'm Captain Arab. I've sailed the 7 seas up.
In the early days, I found it difficult, found it uncomfortable.
Now, you can't shut me up now. Get me a captain of a ship. Ahoy, aye, Jim boy, in the barrel.
Fellas, hey, come on, guys. What is this? I mean, you got 60 guys on the set, Artie.
The Monkees got on so well with Jim Frawley that the producers signed him up as lead director for the new TV series.
Out of 32 shows, 29 were directed by guys who hadn't directed before. They didn't know any more about television than I did, so they just went off half-cocked and did their thing, and we loved it.
They then set about recruiting a team of comedy writers, including TV novice David Evans.
The only thing I had ever written before, professionally, was greeting cards.
Here's some lines you can say, and you can ad-lib the rest.
Kick them low. Reach for the sky.
The producer called us into a meeting, and he said, I have a screening room available for you guys.
It's just like a movie.
What we're going to be doing is screening continuously the Marx Brothers and the 2 Beatles movies, Help and Hard Day's Night. And at the end of the week, he called us all together. He said, now go out and write like that.
Don't you want to be famous, the idol of millions?
No, we just want to be revered by a small minority.
Small minority, small minority. Like a tribe of African pygmies. Get it? Pygmies, huh?
The network must have been scared, because there was nothing like that on television. The only time you saw long-haired kids on television, they were being arrested.
You've got to help us, officer. There's no time left.
The real genius of the Monkees TV show was that there was no authority figure. It was always us together against the rest of the world, against the crazy adults.
You know, we were kind of the outlaws in town, and we were doing forbidden things. The energy was bouncing off the walls.
The Monkees were breaking new ground, but that meant keeping to a punishing schedule.
You usually start 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, makeup and wardrobe, and then go 10, 12 hours on the set. But very quickly, you know, there was such a demand for the music. We would end up at the studio after work for at least a few hours. But they had to. They needed so much material. They wanted a couple of new songs in every episode.
To meet the demand for new material, the producers called in many of the greatest songwriters of the day, including Carole King and Jerry Goffin, Neil Diamond, and Bobby Hart and Tommy Boyce.
Bobby and Tommy are probably the most responsible for the early Monkee sound.
Most of the tracks on the first 2 Monkees albums were produced by Bobby Hart and Tommy Boyce.
The first time we met the guys really in a working situation where we met at the studio. Here's your microphone, here's your earphones. We go take one, and we don't hear anything when they're supposed to come in. So we look out, and they're just still clowning around. And so we say, okay, come on, guys, let's get it together. We got to record this thing. So take 2, same thing. Take 3, they're wrestling with each other on the floor.
Whenever we got together as the 4 of us, it ignites just like that. And we're just like, bang, bada bing, bada boom, bang, you, hey, bing. And so when we'd leave the set and go to the studio, couldn't shut that off.
And Tommy and I vowed to never have more than 1 monkey in the studio at a time after that. The way we worked with them is we would have everything prepared ahead of time. We'd call for either David or Mickey to come over, and they would put a vocal on in 2 or 3 takes, and that's what you still hear today. We'd cut, I think, 10 songs or so for the first album. We needed another song. And I heard just the fade out of the Beatles' new record. It had just come out. Paperback. And I heard, take the last. I don't know why, but that's what I thought they were saying. And I said, well, to myself, well, it's got to be about a train. Take the last train. This is a song that's kind of Beatlesque, and so we need a riff. And Louis Shelton just went right into it.
Take the last train to Clarksville and I'll meet you at the station. You can be here by 4:30, 'cause I've made your reservation. Don't be slow.
While musician Peter Tork enjoyed filming the TV show, making the records would lead to frustration and disappointment.
They said, we're having a recording session tonight, come on in. So I brought my guitar in. They said, why'd you bring in your guitar? I said, why don't I bring in my guitar? No, track's all done. I was devastated. What I didn't realize at the time was that the music was going to have to be cranked out in massive amounts, and that we were going to have people who knew how to make music quickly and well and on order.
David and I were in my car, and it says that, here it is! Take the last train to Clarksville, the Monkees! We just looked at each other and were like, wow, that's really cool. I didn't even know that was going to be the single. I don't think they told us.
Following Doctor Who on a Saturday night, The Monkees, a new series for the young at heart, first aired in Britain on New Year's Eve in 1966, launching a lifelong love affair for a generation of teenage girls.
The trailer was shown just a few days before, and it was Davy up on the table, swashbuckling in a white shirt, and instantly I just knew that he was mine. Well, I was hooked, wasn't I? Absolutely hooked.
I was into the Beatles at the time, so Paul McCartney was the best thing since sliced bread, and the Monkees came on and this guy just was there, and I thought, Paul McCartney who? You know, it's from then on it was Peter Tork.
My mum opened the door and she said, oh, I just said to your father, there's this bloke on the telly with his big brown eyes, and as soon as she sees him, that'll be it. Well, and I saw Mike Nesmith, and that was it. And that's when I fell in love with the Monkees, and my dad said I'd grow out of it, and I will, one day.
The Monkees was a ratings hit around the world.
Then I saw her face. Now I'm a believer.
In January 1967, I'm a Believer reached #1 in the UK chart. Monkey Mania was about to sweep the planet as the boys hit the road.
It was the kind of mayhem that we expected.
At the height of the summer of love.
I was sitting there thinking, this is what life is about, this is what I want to be about.
As the band started to find their own voice.
And this is when this imaginary group became a real group.
(1967). The Monkees had a hit TV series and an increasing grip on the pop charts. They started a world tour, promoting a record on which they hadn't been allowed to play their own instruments.
We hit the road in '67 as the cover band for our own album. We were a cover band. We played Monkees hits. Monkees cover band.
We played 200 concerts with just the 4 of us, and these are 4 guys that are not supposed to play their own music.
The Monkees arrived at Heathrow for a series of London concerts. 14-year-old Linda Williams was at the airport to meet them. She recorded that memorable day in her diary.
Going to the airport to see the Monkees. As the plane approached, I sang monkey songs to myself to keep myself calm.
We landed, come out in the staircase, and the girls were all welcoming the Monkees. And these, of course, were the younger brothers and sisters of the Beatles fans. You know, you have your Beatles, You know, I want the Monkees. And it was the kind of mayhem that we expected.
Davy was waving. He was gorgeous. They waved until two fans ran up to them. Mickey ran, they got Davy. All the Monkees were pushed into a car. Davy forever.
The boys slowly made their way to their London base, pursued by hordes of tearful teenagers.
So I went to the Kensington Garden Hotel to see the Monkees, didn't tell my mum.
Screaming girls, hysterical girls, and that's without a Monkee coming onto the balcony. When the Monkees come out onto the balcony, it just went berserk.
Davy came out with no shirt on, and I have a photograph of Davy with no shirt on. I know that that's Davy Jones with no shirt on, but it looks like a block of flats.
There was like all these raging hormones and girls just screaming, Davy, and it's always Davy, Davy, Davy. I'm not a screamer myself, and I turned around and said to one of my friends that I was with, this girl behind me is really getting on my nerves.
And she was going to turn round and punch me one. And then she realised it was me. She recognised me because we were at the same school.
Our friendship forged from there, and we've been best friends ever since.
The ear-splitting Monkees' sisterhood even triggered a regal reprimand.
The producers got a royal note from Princess Margaret, who was living at the Kensington Palace. Could one keep one's fans quiet, or something like that? One cannot sleep.
Nope, sorry, Maggie. Can't do it.
Teenage Monkee follower Jan Swanton arrived early one day at Kensington Park, where fans were camped out next to the hotel, and was among those who shared a magical morning with Mickey Dolenz.
Mickey came walking from the hotel and just walked up and said, you're not going to chase me, I'm just going to walk and I'm going to go and sit on the bandstand. And he sat up there and he just started singing to us.
I started singing Monkee songs, and then I said, you sing to me. And all these hundreds of little girls start singing their school songs.
He divided us up into groups and he got us singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat, and we were all singing that. And I was sitting there thinking, this is what it's about. This is what life is about. This is what I want to be about.
We all start crying. The girls are crying and I'm singing Monkee songs and they're singing back, and it becomes this, like, you know, beautiful, why can't we all live together and be happy?
And then he just walked back to the hotel, and it was the most perfect moment ever. It really was wonderful. For years afterwards, we used to come up on the anniversary and put flowers on the bandstand and stand and sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat.
Mickey Dolenz had another reason to look back fondly on his time in London. It was there that a British sitcom inspired him to write a Monkees classic.
I hear the Alf-Garnica say to Tony Booth, "You Randy Scouse git." And I'm just like, oh, that's really funny. Oh,
There's a new traitorous scarce git.
Randy Scouse, that's what I'm going to call this new song I'm writing about the Beatles, about me, and about England. And all of a sudden I get a call from the publisher. And he says they want to release Randy Scousegit in England as a single.
She's a wonderful lady and she's mine, all mine.
I'm like, wow, how cool. But the title is kind of rude. Well, what does it mean? And they said, a horny Liverpudlian putz, basically. I said, oh, for God's sake. And they said, you need an alternate title. So that's what it's called in England, alternate title.
Why don't you cut your hair? Why don't you live up there? Why don't you do what I do, see what I feel when I care? Now they've darkened.
In July 1967, the Monkees played 3 sellout concerts at Wembley Arena.
I was absolutely desperate to be noticed, although of course I wasn't going to be. So I made myself a white bell-bottom jumpsuit with Mike embroidered all over it.
Lulu came on to start, and the fans were awful to her. They were shouting at her and calling her abusive names because there'd been a rumour that she and Davy were having a fling at the time.
The noise and just the euphoria and everyone screaming their hearts out, it was the most wonderful experience.
it was hysteria. It was something that you can't even imagine.
It was impossible to hear what was going on, so Mike said, "I'll tap my heel." And that was my click track. It was a visual click track, because I couldn't hear me, couldn't hear them. I had no clue. It was like all over the place.
The Monkees had become a real live touring band, but were still taking flack for not playing the instruments on their records.
Is it true that you don't play your own instruments? Wait a minute, I'm fixing to walk out there in front of 15,000 people, man. If I don't play my own instruments, I'm in a lot of trouble. Hey, give me a G.
The line went, you know, a bunch of 4 talentless musicians. Anybody could do what they did musically.
Let's go.
So I felt the jibes pretty sharply.
That was just the way you made pop records at the time. They were hiring the same musicians that everyone was hiring to play on the tracks. The Beach Boys, the Byrds, Mamas and Papas. I think everybody just kind of, you know, picked on us because we were accessible and huge. An easy mark.
Fed up of the criticism, the Monkees, led by Mike Nesmith, decided to seize control of their own musical destiny.
What does that mean?
It means the Monkees strike back.
Nesmith started by recruiting producer Chip Douglas, who, as the bass player in the Turtles, had just scored a massive hit with Happy Together.
When Mike heard Happy Together, he knew that I had a lot to do with the way that sounded. I think he thought, well, here's a guy that I might be able to control a little bit. And he approached me and said, I think we want you to be our new record producer. I said, well, I don't know a thing about producing records, but he said, don't worry, I'll teach you everything you need to know.
With their own producer at the helm, the Monkees set about recording their 3rd album. This time, they would play their own instruments.
Making that album was a wonderful experience. I could bring my enthusiasm and what musicianship I did have. What a delight.
And the band wrote most of the songs, including For Pete's Sake, by Peter Tork.
We must be what we're going to be. Doesn't make much sense to me. And what we have to be is free. Liberation. I'm all over it.
You know what I'd like to do now?
What?
The Monkees had newfound confidence, but they were inexperienced musicians, which meant it was slow going in the studio for engineer Hank Sicalo.
I was getting these calls constantly, and so was Chip Douglas. You got to finish the album. You got to finish the album.
The executives were calling, well, when are we going to have the album? So, well, as soon as we get it done.
So I keep saying, guys, there's no time. And they needed one more song for the album.
We did a straight 12-bar blues track. Didn't have any lyrics.
It became no time at all.
No time, no time, no time.
It was a gift to Hank Sicalo because he was working with us and everybody else had a little tune on the album. They gave him credit for the writing.
I mean, that they made me the writer of the song, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that they did that, you know, that money. Furnish the house and build a pool.
I was somewhat disappointed when we got the album done because I expected I'll pick up the paper tomorrow morning and there'll be these headlines, Monkees play their own instruments at last. But nothing. You know?
What they had was access to the top songwriters in the business. And they said, no, we don't want that. We want to write our stuff.
You told me you'd always say you told me.
Well, more power to you. You did it. But I think it was the beginning of the end.
Whether we made all the right decisions is really not the point. The point was that we were able to make the decisions. And this is when this imaginary group sort of became a real group.
The local rock group down the street is trying hard to learn their song.
As the Monkees took control of their music, they also wanted to change the way the world saw them. Photographer Henry Diltz helped to catch the new look for the second series.
The first season, they were actually playing the part of these young boys, the Monkees, and they wore their 4-button outfits and Mike with his green hat. But I think by the second season, they weren't playing a role anymore. They were being themselves. They started wearing more of what they felt comfortable in, like Mickey wore the big poncho, and they just wore what they would normally wear.
I can't stand to see a grown bush cry.
The style of the TV series was changing too.
Second year was much looser, and they didn't really follow the scripts the way that they did the first year.
We'll meet back here at 0800 hours, right? Okay, guys, let's go. Come on.
We were much more confident about how to make a TV show, much more confident about writing jokes, and that makes for a much livelier show. I think the second year is vastly better than the first for that reason.
Launch the ship, I say.
The second series is great, but it was time to move on. I mean, I remember feeling a little like, I've done that scene, I've done that joke, I've done that stuff. We started getting a little bored. I think everybody did.
16 shows straight now.
Man,
I mean,
know,
every time we start up a show, you start on the monkey and you pull back.
It may not have had the same zip that it had the first year because we had done it already.
You see one monkey episode, you see all the monkey episodes, man. It's all the same.
The Monkees were growing up. Davy Jones was about to find true love.
It was decided that we should be married.
The band would make an experimental movie.
Does anybody to this day know what that film was about?
And they began to reach the end of the road.
When the show went off the air, there was no Monkees. It didn't exist.
By 1968, the Monkees were international pop and TV stars. But at the heart of the band's British appeal was a boy with his roots firmly embedded in working-class Manchester. Though Davy Jones was now spending much of his time abroad, he still found time to make trips back to England. Granada Television filmed this visit to the street where he and his 3 older sisters grew up.
This was a row of terraced houses, facing our row of terraced houses, and we lived at number 20 at the end there. Just the 2 up, 2 down. The back was the kitchen, the front room was the sitting room, 2 bedrooms, and there was 4 children in one room and Mum and Dad in the other.
At the age of just 3, Davy first appeared on stage at nearby Lees Street Church with his sisters in supporting roles.
My dad always wanted a seat on the front row because he had 4 children in it. He used to say, if I don't get a front seat, well, you're all coming out. It was just as joke. But everything revolved around Lee Street.
It was our life, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
Young Davy's talents were brought to the attention of television bosses.
We had an auntie. I think she was one that wrote to Coronation Street.
She wrote to the studios and said, my nephew's in a lot of plays at school and he's very good.
In 1961, at the tender age of 14, Davy joined the cast of Coronation Street.
I became an actor. I got my feet wet, and as small as the part was, and as however I delivered the dialogue, that was my first taste of professional show business.
Take your cap off and give your grandma a kiss. Leslie Morgan's only 8 and he doesn't have to kiss his grandma. Well, I'm sure I want no kisses.
He was Ina Sharple's grandson, and of course Ina was the big, towering, dominant, frightening woman, and he was this lovely, endearing little boy.
So what she had to say about my face again? She said you look like a budgie that had turned into a Pekingese.
But he came in with that extra bit, that energy, that vibrancy, and that liveliness and good humour and likeability.
After a short spell on the street, young Davy started to train as a jockey, the beginning of a lifelong love of horses.
When I started riding, people said, oh, that's Ina Sharple's grandson. And that was the first time I really sort of knew that show business could bring you this applause, this recognition. And so I thought, I want a bit more of that.
The starstruck teenager was plucked from the stables to join the West End cast of Oliver. Davy transferred with the show to Broadway, signed for Columbia Records, and went on to make his fame and fortune with the Monkees. Some of that newfound wealth was spent buying his father a new house back home in Manchester. The problem was getting past the fans to see it.
The whole of the street was full from one end to the other. There wasn't a yard between anybody. There was hundreds and hundreds of them. It was quite frightening, actually.
One of the world's most recognisable pop stars was left scrambling over the neighbours' back walls to get to his father's house.
He climbed over all these fences, and a lady came out and she said, "What you think you're doing?" And he says, "I'm trying to get in." He said, "Oh," she said, "it's David Jones." She said, so she dressed him up in a frock and a headscarf. She put lipstick on him. And I looked out the back window and said, "There's a girl coming over the fence." And I ran out to chuck her back. And he said, "It's me, dear."
But Mr. Jones wasn't overly impressed by the return of the prodigal son.
And I knocked on the door, and he says, "Hello?" I said, "Yeah, David, I've come from America." He said, "You're not my son." I said, "What?" I came 3,000 miles. He said, "Go and get your hair cut."
Back in his new home of LA, Davy Jones faced a more difficult challenge. His bosses insisted that the Monkees' heartthrob kept secret from his fans an increasingly serious relationship with girlfriend Linda Haynes.
We'd always go out in groups, and I'd always sort of be in the background. It was like, whatever works, let's just do it, you know. After I became pregnant, then it became a little more difficult to go out and about. It was decided that we should be married. So even though it had to be kept secret, the decisions were still coming from on high that we should at least be married in case it was discovered. It was some time later that he was doing an interview with an Australian journalist. David just told him, he said, this is my wife, this is my daughter, and it seems like such a small thing, but it was a very big step for him to take some matters in his own hands.
Revealing his hidden family was a weight off Davy's shoulders, but a devastating shock to his army of young fans. Teenager Linda Williams recorded her reaction in her secret diary.
Just yesterday. Saturday, the 7th of June, 1969. Carol phoned. "Davy is married." "Oh God, why?" "You don't have to answer that. He loves Linda. 18 months and I didn't know anything about it. Help." I don't know why it was kept secret for so long, but it was, and had to deal with it. But I can remember being really devastated.
The Monkees were desperate to shake off their teeny bop image. They saw their planned feature film, to be titled Head, as an opportunity to appeal to a more mature audience.
We did not want to do a 90-minute version of the show, an extended episode. We wanted to maybe push the envelope or something.
With that in mind, director Bob Rafelson recruited a promising young actor called Jack Nicholson to write the screenplay.
He had not heard of the Monkees, and so he said, "You know, Monkees, what's that?" And I told him, and then proceeded a long courtship to figure out what would be in this movie.
And then he just was around all the time, soaking up the whole monkey thing.
And we began to write the thing. One of us would go on to a rant about, okay, now this is what's happening, and the Monkees are doing this, and then they go into water, and the water changes color, and then there's porpoises. And the other one would sit and say, "Yeah, that's good, okay, let's get that down."
Rafelson then signed up Tony Basil, who would later find fame herself as a pop star, to choreograph the film.
Head was like really progressive and really abstract and experimental.
Something doesn't change, there is only one.
It was was everything. It went from Broadway to experimental film.
Years ago I knew a boy. He was his daddy's pride and joy.
Tony Basil's big performance would be a duet with Davy Jones on Daddy's Song.
It had a very interesting Hollywood musical feel to it. But what was progressive about the song was the way Bob shot it.
I just had the idea to shoot it entirely on a white stage, entirely on a black stage, and then cut just 2 or 3 frames at a certain point. And it's very hard to look at these things when they're flash cuts like that, and they hadn't been done that much. I had such an aversion after making this film to doing anything like that again for the rest of my life.
The film cost $800,000 to make, but only recovered $16,000 at the box office.
The whole idea of Head was to be different, and we succeeded in doing that, but we didn't succeed in making a movie that everybody wanted to come see.
Does anybody to this day know what that film was about?
I can only speak for myself. I didn't mind. I thought it was kind of cool.
In the summer of 1968, during the production of the film, NBC decided not to commission a third Monkees television series.
I think, my good compatriots, the time has come to split up.
Oh,
what?
no, man.
No, man. What about the...
I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere with these guys. I didn't feel heard or seen.
This isn't working out, you know. I expected more from you, Michael.
The Monkees was a television show about a band, an imaginary band. So when the show went off the air, there was no Monkees. It didn't exist.
Just 2 years after their television debut and the global outbreak of monkey mania, the band were breaking apart. But their story was not complete. In the decades to come, the Monkees would be back.
The 3 of us went on the road, and it was explosive.
Until tragedy finally put an end to the reunions.
I never had a brother. He was the closest thing to a brother I ever had.
After selling more than 20 million records and making nearly 60 episodes of their hit TV show, by the turn of the 70s, the Monkees were no more. The 4 members of the band set about making their own ways in the world. Davy Jones moved out of the Los Angeles limelight with his wife Linda and their young family, and set out on a solo career.
Are you going to Scarborough Fair?
Davy and Linda separated some years later, but he remarried and by the late 80s was the proud father of 4 daughters.
Remember me to one who lives there.
3 of the girls met up recently in California to remember good times shared with their famous dad.
Seeing him on stage, I would remind myself that this wasn't average.
But not until my adult life, I have to say. Not until my adult life did I go, okay, that's just weird. That's my dad up there.
You gotta stop your crying sometime.
And he sounded so good. And he had so much energy.
He would go up on stage and you just felt this palpable energy. And it's almost indescribable. But it just made everybody feel so good.
Yeah.
Davy's newfound freedom also gave him the chance to enjoy his other great love, horse riding.
Dad had a passion for horses that was like almost indescribable.
Yeah, I want you to go 7 furlongs, nice, steady.
We have lots of brothers and sisters of the horse kind.
Yeah.
In the mid-90s, Davy Jones finally fulfilled a lifelong ambition when he won his first race as a jockey at the age of 50.
Here's the trophy to prove it. I'm not big on trophies, or you don't see any gold records as you see around, but I'm very grateful, and it's a nice addition to the family.
The other Monkees were also busy with new ventures after the breakup of the band. Mike Nesmith would have a solo career of his own, scoring a worldwide hit with Rio in 1977.
To fly down to Rio tonight.
The song also launched him as a pop video pioneer. Nesmith would go on to play an important role in the creation of MTV. Meanwhile, Micky Dolenz moved to Britain and started an unlikely career directing children's television shows.
That's all I did. No singing, no acting, no Mickey the Monkey. I was Michael Dolenz, the television producer, and I was thrilled. It was wonderful. It was good to get me away from that life.
In 1986, on the 20th anniversary of the Monkees' creation, a promoter proposed breaking the band out of cold storage. The temptation proved too much for 3 of the group.
You know, I've been working pretty steadily, a year in and year out, directing and producing these television shows. Yeah, let's go. Let's do it for 8 weeks or whatever it was, 10 weeks.
Joining Micky Dolenz on tour were Davy Jones and Peter Tork, who'd been working as a musician since the breakup of the band.
The 3 of us went on the road, and it was explosive. It was just the biggest tour of the summer that year. It was wonderful.
Yes, I saw her face. I'm a believer. I'm a believer. I'm a believer. I'm a believer.
Mike Nesmith declined to join the '86 tour, but he did get together with the rest of the band on another reunion in 1997, only to face a grilling from Richard and Judy.
You've been the one who's kept back from the reunions for all this time. Why?
Well, I've been busy with other things.
That's a very anecdotic answer.
Yeah.
And do you think that sort of once it was over, and there was no point getting back?
It's never over. It's like the mafia. Once you're around, no, it's like...
Yeah. You know, I just did other things for the intervening years, but I've always been a part of this spiritually and emotionally. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
1997 would be the last time the 4 Monkees toured together. In February 2012, news came through that meant the band was no more.
The Monkees' Davy Jones has died in Florida at the age of 66. He had a heart attack.
Yeah, that was a very sad morning. I had gotten up and on my phone was a missed call from Florida, and it was rather early, and the first thing I thought was that something was terribly wrong.
And then I got a phone call telling me that he had had a heart attack.
Just really unexpected, and he's just really young.
In some ways, I felt like, oh my God, he's finally resting. He was the hardest working person I have ever known. He just never stopped.
You know, you always look forward to things you're going to do. You're not going to do them anymore.
You go through the kind of thing that we did, such pressure, such emotion, success, failure. He was the closest thing to a brother I ever had. But he was so funny, and he was such a charming guy, and he would kill for you. He would take the shirt off his back.
Goodbye, fellas.
Oh, I could hide 'neath the wings of the bluebird as she sings.
Davy Jones and the rest of the Monkees recorded some of the greatest songs of the 60s. Songs that sound as fresh today as they did over 40 years ago. They would be the first and perhaps finest of a long line of so-called manufactured pop groups put together by producers from scratch.
The Monkees was, you know, it was one of those things. It came at the right time.
Cheer up, sleepy Jean. Oh, what can it mean to a daydream believer and a homecoming queen?
There was real joy in what we did when we came to work every day, and it manifested itself on film.
It was a chance for me to be my fullest self. You don't look lightly on those moments.
I think you have to think about all the good times. It's been a good journey. I have enjoyed it.
It was 4 young kids that were just friendly and fun. We were just too busy singing to, to put anybody down.
It makes you feel good because there's that joy and hope and optimism and getting along together.
Well, that wraps up another Laugh Riot. And this is Mike Nesmith, Mickey Dolenz,
And Peter Tom.
and Davy Jones, and Mickey Dolenz. Here we come, walking down the street. We get the funniest looks from everyone we meet.
Well, it's the last in the series of Love Your Garden, and Alan and his team find themselves at Bluebell Wood Children's Hospice in South Yorkshire, making some youngsters very happy. That's tomorrow night at 8. The Solana residents need to watch out. A con man starts working his way through the holidaymakers. Benny Dorm is at 9 tomorrow.